Hello and welcome to Super Respectable. My name is David Lewis from The Hague, and my co-host from his lovely studios in Vancouver is Tosh. How are you?
I'm good, Dave. How are you?
I'm very good, very happy and excited to have another guest this episode, and that is our very good friend Steve Tomosk. Steve, how's it going?
Good. I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
We're good, Steve. Nice to have you on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. I'm excited about this.
Of course. Don't get your hopes too
Steve,
high. We're not that excited.
Steve comes to us from Ottawa, so it's always a challenge to try and triangulate between the three time zones we have here. I think we're covering the globe pretty well, but this works very nicely. So thank you very much for making the time for us.
Of course.
By way of background, I've known Steve since we were very, very little. I don't know what age it was, but grew up on the same street and been very good friends ever since. And Mr. Tosh has met Steve on a number of occasions in the various residences that we've lived in throughout the years.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So Steve, I have a question for you. So you knew Dave. Did you guys go to high school together?
No, actually. It's funny. Like Dave and I, because he said I grew up on the same street. So I don't know, we played road hockey as
good
kids.
Canadian kids.
Yeah. But so Dave went to the French local elementary school from I guess kindergarten to grade 4. You were there?
Yeah.
I went to the English one, but then in the 5th grade, we were both in the same school.
Oh.
So grades 5 to 8, and then grade 9, I defected and went to the arts high school, and Dave went to the local high school. So,
Dave, is this the high school where it was on the news for all the crime and drugs and drug rings?
It was all under the radar. That sort of stuff. No, never made the headlines.
That's right. And Steve, so
and then we did Carleton. He did Ottawa U.
Right, that's right.
We just crisscrossed afterwards.
A lot of crisscrossing, but yeah.
And so now you're in Ottawa. You're in. We were talking in the pre-show. You're in lockdown. You're pretty much staying home with your wife. What's the situation like in Ottawa now? We always ask all our guests, how are you coping? How's the COVID situation? Any bright light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, Ottawa, it's a government and tech town. So I think there's been a lot of people that have been able to work remotely, which has been good. But we've had our increases in cases, and in fact, right now, case numbers are increasing. I think we've done 6, if not 7 days in a row with triple-digit new case counts. So we're trending in the wrong direction right now, at least. So. Yeah, but the vaccines they're rolling out to the 75 plus group now, and I think you just have to be hopeful and look at the positives and think, we're on the way now. It might be slow, but we're moving at least.
Absolutely. And your parents, your family, your in-law, everyone's been doing okay, or has anyone ever got COVID in this situation, or most people have just been following the rules?
Yeah, with my family, my parents are both in Ottawa here, and they're both retired, so they're at home. They've been following rules. Myself and my wife Kat, we've been helping them out by getting groceries and doing other errands for them, just trying to keep them at home as much as possible.
Yeah.
My in-laws are kind of spread out. My brother-in-law lives in Virginia in the U.S.
Wow.
And he's younger than we are, and he's got his first shot already, and the second one lined up. Yeah. But the case counts are pretty bad down there, and he's had coworkers who have gotten COVID and stuff. And it's just it's all over the map,
I was just Dave, Steve, I was just talking to a friend of my wife, and a friend of mine the other day, and we were just talking about when we look back at this in a year or 5 years or 10 years, it's going to be in our history books, right? And it's going to be something so strange that we lived through. And I guess it's hard because we're in the midst of it now, but looking back, hopefully it'll be something that's just sort of a blip in our lives and human history. But it's definitely strange. It's definitely probably the strangest thing I've ever experienced.
Oh, hands down. And it's sometimes now we're a full year into it basically, and you kind of forget sometime that there's the drop or the backdrop of a global pandemic in your lives, because just being at home and washing hands and social distancing has become so normal. You forget that there's this massive global pandemic that's all around us.
Yeah, I know. And Dave,
Yeah, and the weird thing is they said that we're not going to remember it in the way we think we will, because there was very few like markers of time and events. It's like the way the virus is, it's like in the air and invisible. So we've just been at home doing puzzles and playing board games. So that's our memory from COVID.
Yeah.
That's pretty,
yeah.
pretty weird.
I think another weird thing will be once it's over, I think some of the habits we developed during the lockdown might kind of keep going. I don't know if you like keep sanitizing your hands automatically until you stop or you notice what you're doing, or you might keep a distance between people just as a default. But like the other day, I actually went into the bullion, a place where I was just exchanging US dollars a little bit, and I was trying to beat the meter, so I totally ran out of my car, and I forgot to wear a mask, and it was the first time in a year I hadn't worn a mask. So when I got to the counter, I realized, and the only thing I could do was put my like face into my jacket, and then the lady was very nice. She said like, "Do you need a mask?" And so she grabbed me one, and etc. But strange times, I think.
Yeah, I left the house a couple times in the car and like forgot a mask, so I had to turn around, go back home, get them. Like it's just it's second nature, but also sometimes you just forget, you go back to old habits.
Yeah.
Wallet, keys, phone, mask.
Mask. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Anyways, let's move on to more joyous subjects like international travel. So the reason amongst many that I brought you on to the show today, Mr. Steve, is you've had a very interesting career. You worked for a renewable energy project developer. Is that right?
That's it. That's right.
Is that the right phrasing?
Yeah.
And through that job, you got to travel to some very interesting parts of the world. You went to Pakistan, parts of Africa, Central America, and some other remote parts of Canada as well. So I thought it'd be cool and interesting for our many listeners to hear about your travels to these places that most people haven't had the good fortune to go. It's not normal tourist destinations, let's say.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think any of these would have been normal tourist destinations, but I'm glad I got to experience them all. Yeah.
Which one out of the list of places you went to was the most touristy, if you could call it that?
The most touristy, if I could call it that.
I guess somewhere in Central America.
Yeah, I mean, so in Central America, I went to Honduras. I've been there numerous times, and you Google Honduras, and the first thing that comes up, is the murder capital of the world, San Pedro Sula there.
Yeah, that's not great.
Of course, all the negative stuff. But Honduras actually does have quite the tourist area in the north. There's an island, which is just north of the actual like land mass of the country, and up there they've got scuba diving. They have a huge, I think, second largest coral reef in the world, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool.
Really good for scuba diving in that area. Yeah.
And you didn't get a chance to do all that fun stuff while you were there, I guess.
No, I didn't make it to the island up north there. But so I've flown into Tegucigalpa, spent a lot of time there, and also traveling into some of the central parts of the country. So Olancho was one of the provinces where we were doing some work there. One time I went to Honduras too. I also flew into San Pedro Sula. We had some meetings up in that city. I was there for I think 4 days. Yeah.
So and you don't have to go into detail, but in broad terms, what was the purpose of these business trips? What brought you to these locations?
Yeah, so we were working on a renewable energy project in this country, and of course we have local business partners down there that we were partnered with. And like with these projects, you want to see the actual land site where these projects are going to be. So you have to travel out, and I mean this is a couple hours in a Jeep on the highways, and into some more rural roads, which was great to see some of the backcountry. Additionally too, like, bringing in, investors and other project partners, they have to get the lay of the land. They want to meet the local partners. They want to meet, government officials, etc. So a lot of these trips too would just be, bringing people in and doing the meet and greet, and then, getting down to business, working out details, that kind of stuff.
Oh.
Mm.
And like when you go on these trips, do you usually go with other colleagues, or is it just you representing your company that goes down there?
Usually it was with others from the company. There was one trip I did to Honduras, so it was just myself that went down to meet with our local partners plus some investors. But
Yeah.
usually, there'd be 2 or 3 of us that would go down.
That's very comforting, because I remember when I went to Nigeria, I was meant to travel with a colleague, and that colleague decided to take a different flight. And arriving in an airport in a country that you don't know very well and has a certain reputation, that gives you quite the feeling. I can imagine if you were arriving in any one of those airports, you want to have your feet pretty soon.
There's nothing better than getting off the plane and like walking into the airport and seeing your business partner there. That's a great
It's like you want to give them a hug.
Yeah. It's a great feeling.
So Steve, had you traveled before frequently in your personal life before traveling for work? Did you kind of have a lay of how travel worked internationally? Like you were pretty comfortable with it, or was it sort of a new thing when going to X number of places?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I've traveled a fair bit internationally. Dave and I actually, when we were 19, we got on a plane and we flew to England, and then we bought like a Eurail pass, and we went down to France, we went to Belgium, Germany, Holland, Austria.
Wow, I didn't know that. Oh, maybe you did tell me a long time ago. I usually don't listen to anything
maybe.
Dave says, so like.
Then we got scurvy and ate all the fruit at my uncle's place.
Yeah, we didn't eat very well. We did a trip on the cheap for sure. Like I'm talking like we were in France, like just eating a whole baguette for breakfast kind of thing. Like that was it. Like.
That's awesome. What was like when you and Dave traveled? Like, I'm assuming this was like summer break or like a couple months between university and high school and university or something like that, right?
Yeah, it was I think the end of first year university. I think, Dave?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
It's so long.
It's all a blur.
So Steve, so like Dave and I, like we talk about travel a lot because we live overseas and we've traveled a lot. Like what are some of your, like when you go to a new place, whether it's for work or personal, what are some of the things that you like to do? Like when you get to a new destination that you're perhaps might be a first time or you're not so comfortable with. Are you one of those people that trip advises everything from the beginning? You get notes, the Lonely Planet books? Are you more on the go? Like what's your day in a new country like?
For sure. I'm definitely a planner. I like to at least know, what might be there or what is there before I go. But I also don't like to, have a firm itinerary because, things change and like maybe, something that wasn't in the book or on the website you find, right? You don't want to like miss out on something that,
Totally.
is happening like temporarily or like just at that certain time you're in that country or city. Like you want to be able to be flexible, but I like to at least have a rough outline before I go and kind of know what I'm getting myself into. Yeah.
Sometimes ignorance is bliss, I guess, in some situations.
Well, yeah, there's that too sometimes. Yeah.
Are you a foodie, Steve? Are you like you want to experience local cuisines, or are you racist and not want to do it? I'm just joking. Like, what's your opinion on food? I mean, give us some examples of some of the stuff you've done in different countries that you've really kept in your memory.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I don't know if I'd call myself a foodie, but I do, I love, exploring the local cuisines for sure. Like that's a huge part of a country and a culture, right? It's a local food. Like that's how, you get a real feel for the place, the culture, and what's happening with the food. So, I mean, just thinking about like, on a work trip, like we were in Pakistan and I was at a luncheon one time and like, just the food in Pakistan was just amazing. Just didn't have a bad meal there. Even on the plane over there, I was on, PIA and like just the food on that was just spectacular.
Really?
Yeah, just amazing. But we had a luncheon one day and I was eating something. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but there was something in there that it was so spicy And I started to hiccup at
Yeah.
the table after ingesting. I don't know what it was, but I had to excuse myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the spice levels and how you handled it in Pakistan, because I'm not that great, and one of the effects I had once was I lost my hearing for a little bit because of the spice levels.
I didn't know you could do that.
Neither did I. Yeah, it was like something out of a cartoon. You know, it was like when you go through a tunnel or on a plane, the pressure you hear the.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. You got the hiccups. There's all sorts of things that can happen.
Yeah, it's never happened to me before. It was the weirdest thing. Yeah.
Where?
So that was, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna ask, where in Pakistan did you go, Steve? Which city?
So we were kind of all over the place, actually. So we flew in to Karachi. We did the Toronto direct to Karachi flight, which was something. It was like, I think 14, 15 hours, the longest direct flight I've ever taken, hands down. So we started off in Karachi. Then we flew to Quetta, which is the capital city in Baluchistan.
Okay.
And that was interesting. I'm, again, going back to like, I like to do my due diligence before I go. I'm the kind of guy, I go to travel.gc.ca, check out the government of Canada's travel website, advisories. And of course, it says like, avoid all travel to Baluchistan. And I was like, well, my itinerary says I'm going there for 4 days. So so I spent 4 days in that province there. So like, in the city Quetta, like I think they have, at the time I was there in 2016, they had basically one major, like upscale, I'd call it like a Western style hotel.
Yeah.
It was full like, perimeter fence, armed guards, that kind of stuff, which gives you, I don't know if it's a false sense of security, but it gives you some sense of security. So that was like our home base. And we were also looking at land in Baluchistan for a project. So that was super interesting. Like, we get up in the morning, have breakfast, and then like we put into these bulletproof Toyota Land Cruisers.
That's crazy.
And we'd head out, and there'd be a pickup truck in front of us with guys with AK-47s, and you pickup truck in the back of our vehicle, also same thing, like 6 or 7 guys all armed. And like we would be traveling through Quetta and then down the highway in this like 3-car convoy, basically, to these sites. And like we get to a land site and we'd pull up, and the armed guys would get out and they'd kind of do a scouting or a survey as to seeing what's going on. And then eventually we get the all clear signal, we can get out of our vehicle and take a look at things.
How was your
quite the experience?
What did you feel in those moments? Like, was it just adrenaline and you just went with it, or is it excitement or just total panic? I don't know, like how I would handle such a situation. Because it's so foreign to someone from Ottawa to handle that.
Well, this is it, right? Like being like, born and raised in Ottawa, Canada, like this was a totally foreign thing to me. So the adrenaline was definitely going. It was definitely exciting. But like just like, again, like we had a great local partner there, and like he was with me the whole time. And like I trusted him, right? Like I trusted that like he arranged all this stuff. And like there's actually one day we were supposed to go somewhere and he called off the trip for whatever reason, but like I trusted the guy. And I mean, maybe it was a bit of just hoping for the best, or maybe things were just really secure, I don't know. By the end of the day, it was just a fantastic experience, which I really am glad I got to do that trip. Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow. And like your Pakistan trip, was this the first time you'd been to that country?
Yes, first time I've been to Pakistan. Yeah. And we also, after Quetta, we also went to Islamabad for a few days too, and then back to Karachi.
Was there anything kind of like in Pakistan that surprised you culturally, that was so much like that you had not expected, or something that was so significantly different than Ottawa, for example? Because I ask just because my family's from Bangladesh, which used to be part of Pakistan. And so I've been to Pakistan. I've never been to Pakistan. I've been to India and Bangladesh. And I think Pakistan's similar to those countries. But even for me, as a Canadian, kind of like raised here, but from there, it shocks me every time I go back. It's sort of a culture shock. I was just wondering if you felt anything that kind of was different or you didn't expect.
Yeah, so this, like, the trip to Pakistan was the first one I did with the company,
Oh,
and
they threw you in the
yeah,
deep end, huh?
yeah, exactly.
Off you
Just
go.
hop right in with 2 feet. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, culture shock, for sure. Like, arriving in Karachi, which has a population, I'm sure it's over 20 million people, like
Crazy.
even maybe 25. Like, it's just this massive city,
Yeah,
and like just the drive from the airport to our hotel.
yeah,
Like the cars are like, they're just weaving in and out of the, I'll use lanes in air quotes here.
yeah.
The horns are blaring.
Yeah.
There's a motorcycle that has like 3 people on it plus cargo, like, and it's also weaving. So
Insanity.
just seeing that. So definitely, I guess I don't want to call it chaos, but just like, maybe we're so used to order
Yeah,
on this side, in the Western world here, that just the free flowing, the free movement was really something too.
yeah.
To really, like, just really open my eyes to, like, wow, and this is not how we operate over here, but this is traffic in Karachi here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
totally.
found it was like sensory overload when I was in India for 2 weeks, and obviously Goa, where we were for the wedding, was relatively calm, but Mumbai is again a mega city, and I felt kind of the same thing where it was just like the sights, smells, sounds,
Mhm.
everything was just hitting you,
Yeah.
and that's very much the feeling I had, was just being overwhelmed with all those different things.
Yeah, I think sensory overload is a great way to phrase it, Dave. Like, it's the sights, it's the smells, it's the visuals. Like, there's just so much happening all at once. Yeah.
I remember it's so funny because like I grew up in Vancouver, which is not a small city but not a big city, and then in Ottawa I lived literally like 3 minutes from Parliament when I was working there. So I lived downtown, and it used to shock me that like at 5 o'clock the streets would be like empty right in front of like the capital of the country, right? And in
Yep.
places like Islamabad or Dhaka or Mumbai, it's like 24 hour sensory overload, right? And so there's like people everywhere you go, and just that quiet and that silence in other parts of the world. Sometimes it's strange when you've seen the opposite, right? The fact that like in Islamabad, I'm sure you guys are just packed in like sardines, but then you get to a place like outside of Ottawa, and then it's just like you for the next couple kilometers, there's no one around you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's growing up in Canada, in like, these, yeah, Ottawa is not a densely populated place, and spending time in rural Canada, like, you're all by yourself. Like, it's just totally different from some of these mega cities and other places. Yeah.
Totally. Well, speaking of which, sorry, Dave, you've also been to some remote places in Canada. Dave was saying, yeah.
Yeah. So we also worked on like diesel offset solar projects with remote First Nations in Northern Ontario.
Okay.
So that was a whole, yeah, you want to talk about the opposite. Like, I mean, I've been into, I guess, 3 different First Nations, and like, these places aren't accessible by road. You have to fly in.
Okay.
And on a pretty small aircraft generally.
Yeah.
On like a gravel grass kind of runway.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that's a whole other experience in itself. Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
because I think we have this, even us from the urban cities, we feel as though most of Canada is pretty much like that urban line belt along the border where all the major cities are. But our country is huge, and there are people in some very remote places, especially in the north. And I'm fascinated with lifestyle and resources and how they live. But I don't think I've ever been to any remote place in Canada. I think the smallest city I went to was like 1,000 or 2,000 people for work as well. But Dave, have you been to any small parts of the country? Or remote parts of
Not
the country?
not like that. No. I've been to Northern Ontario, but it was like Sudbury, so it was a city town. But yeah, I did get a sense of the size of just Ontario. I think like the UK can fit inside of Ontario like 6 or
Craziness.
7 times, something ridiculous like that. So it's just vast land.
Well,
Yeah.
Steve, what was your impression of Northern Ontario, of the places you went to? Like, is it what we think it would be like? Is it pretty remote and isolated, or are people living their lives there? Like, what's it like?
Yeah, it's a totally different way of life. So I mean, like,
Really?
in the First Nations I went to, so yeah, like Thunder Bay is kind of like the base for like your takeoff point.
Yeah.
And then like you're going north, and like, as you're flying up north, you're just thinking like you're looking around down at the ground below, like it's just lakes and trees, and like there's nothing.
Yeah.
And then like the amazing thing is you'll fly for like an hour or 2 hours, and you like realize that like we're still in Ontario. Like, don't
Yeah.
forget, there's still like Hudson Bay, and then like Nunavut, like there's still so much more Canada
It's
up north.
insane.
Like
How do
it's
they?
just wild.
I don't understand how people manage all this from a government point of view, or from just the different ministries, or even the people. Like sometimes when you talk to some of these people who live in Nunavut or whatever, they're like, "Oh, I have to take two trains or two boats. Sorry, two planes to get to where I want to go, or I need to. This boat only leaves on Wednesday each week, or something like that." It's insane that people live so remote. But I mean, not to judge, but
Well, you can kind of see why the apples cost $20 and pineapples cost $50, because imagine getting them out there.
Yeah.
I went to a couple of they call them the Northern Store up in the First Nations, and like the prices are just amazing. It's just like from an economics point of view, I understand, like, yes, the transportation costs, etc., are it's much harder to get a bag of lettuce up there compared to the corner shop in Toronto or Ottawa, but still, like, it's just mind-boggling, the prices of food.
Insane.
Totally.
Yeah.
But back to your international travels, I'm curious, like, because you went to some pretty rough places according to these travel advisory sites. I'm sure most of them there's warnings against Canadians going there. But did you ever actually feel danger? I mean, having armed guards around you adds to that a little bit. But in other situations, did you ever feel like you were at risk?
Honestly, no. And that may just have been me being naive, but at the same time, I'll just go back to what I kind of said before. Like, we had a local partner in each country. Like, had I just stepped off the plane myself and tried to, hail a taxi or something, like, to get me to a hotel or to get me to a restaurant, like, I would not feel comfortable with that whatsoever. But with these trips, everything was so planned, and like, I gotta commend every single one of our local partners for making these trips successful. Like, we didn't get stuck, and we didn't run into weird situations at all, and like, one of the interesting things I found too is, like, every hotel, like whether it was in Pakistan or Burkina Faso or the Ivory Coast, like, had this airport style security at the front gates. Like, it's the metal detector, it's the baggage, like, put your bags on this conveyor, we're going to scan them, we're going to wand you down, like, there's all these checks in place, which at least gives the feeling that things are secure and things are being looked after.
Well, the places that you went to, was the security because they knew that foreigners were coming in, they needed it, or was there a security concern generally, or did something happen? Like, is it always like that for foreigners in these countries?
Yeah, I think it depends on the hotels, right? Like, I mean, we had we stayed at very good hotels, like, for sure. Like, they were always set back from the road. They'd have a perimeter. They'd have the again, the airport style security. But like, when I was doing looking at Ouagadougou, for example, like, there had been a terrorist attack there a couple of years before I was there, and I looked at the hotel where it happened, and it seemed to be right on the it abutted the street. It's right on the street there, easy access. And of course, I don't have all the facts and everything about what exactly happened, but it looked like it was just right on the edge of the street, and you could easily access it and whatnot. And of course, it was a place also frequented by Westerners. So to use a broad brush, I think those kind of hotels would be the ones to be targeted if they were going to be targeted. But yeah, just generally speaking, I always use our local partners, did my own due diligence, made sure we were staying at as secure places as possible, and nothing has ever happened so far. So
That's good. What's Burkina Faso or Cote d'Ivoire like? I'm really fascinated with Africa and African countries. I've lived in Africa for a year, and so like it's very appealing to
Which
me. But
country?
I was in Morocco, right?
Oh,
Which is
Morocco. I never considered it the
yeah,
same
my,
way.
my
Yeah.
wife is Moroccan, so I lived there for a year,
Okay.
in northern Africa. But I went to
Yeah.
Mauritania, which was like a real culture shock
Oh
for me. It
yeah.
was so isolated. But what was your experience like? And then Dave went to Nigeria. But
Mhm.
what were those two places like for you?
So in Cote d'Ivoire, I was in Abidjan,
Okay.
and on that particular trip that I went there, it wasn't a let's get out, get around, see the sights and stuff. It was basically we're there for a negotiation. So it was
Right.
basically hotel to an office and back. That was basically the week-long trip. But Abidjan is quite the city.
Yeah.
Has a real Parisian flavor to it. Like the food there was phenomenal,
Yeah.
and it's got it's built up like a lot of like towers and stuff. Like you'd feel like you were in for lack of a better phrase, like a Western downtown core.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
whereas Ouagadougou had a totally different feel, even though the countries border each other.
Yeah.
Ouagadougou had a much different feel. It didn't have the same maybe infrastructure that Abidjan
Right.
had, but still I really enjoyed just being immersed in that city. Like again, it had the real hustle and bustle feel, just like lots of action, lots going on, lots of
Yeah.
things moving. So again, just like a sensory overload kind of excitement place.
Did you get any souvenirs from these places?
Yeah, I tried to get something from each place. I think I got a couple of things upstairs, like on the mantle, some like local like carvings. I used to pick up local carvings from these places. They seem to
Yeah.
be well, they're easily accessible, and they travel quite well. So those seem to be my go-to to pick up some local art or carvings. Yeah.
It's interesting because like some countries just aren't really set up for tourism.
Yeah.
And because I've also been to Gabon in Central Africa, and unless you're very wealthy and want to do like inland adventure tours, which they apparently have, no one really goes there for tourism. And so like the hotel I was staying at was like one of the main nice hotels. I think they had like a few trinkets, but it was like a throwaway little shop, and around the city there was nothing there for people. They're like, why would you buy any kind of tourist stuff? But whereas if you go to Rome or Paris, the city's just flooded with all that
Magnets of the Pope and
magnets.
like
Yeah,
all the stuff
exactly.
you don't need.
Stuff, all this crap that's made in China, anyways. Yeah.
So I got a question for you guys: is when you travel to these places, does the cost of things, lifestyle costs, surprise you coming from like a Western country where things? I guess if this is all you know, then like this is your default. But one thing that really surprises me is costs of things, depending on if I go to a wealthy country or a poorer country. And then like I always use a can of Coke as my default like denominator. But like, do costs kind of come into your brains? How cheap things are, or how expensive things are?
Yeah, the thing I noticed for sure, and like like being on business trips, like dealing with local business partners, like for sure you're getting a privileged like
Sure.
viewpoint of the countries for sure. But it's amazing that like having drivers, having a cook, having cleaning staff, like this is all like is pretty
Yeah.
commonplace.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
the cost of labor, just yeah.
It's craziness. Dave, what in your when you went to Nigeria or Gabon and stuff, like even Europe, some places in Europe, how did costs come into your perception?
Well, Gabon was very expensive.
Really? Okay.
It's a very expensive place. I think somewhat for similar reasons as the Northern Ontario rural remote Canada reasons, because it is quite a isolated place,
Yeah.
and I guess it's quite costly to bring in things for a country of 1.3 million into their port or whatever. So
Yeah.
things are quite expensive there. Nigeria, I'm trying to think. Honestly, in Nigeria, it was pretty much like Steve's trip to Cote d'Ivoire. We were very much like hotel, office,
Yeah.
don't go anywhere else, and go back to the airport. So it's harder to say, but I don't think it was necessarily cheap. I think it's possibly just because we were in like this expensive business hotel and business prices. But if we were to go into like mainland Lagos, I'm sure the prices would be a lot more reasonable.
Yeah, I think sometimes like one thing I dislike is that when you travel and you're visibly a tourist, like like people know by not only like the color of your skin or the fact that you don't fit, but how you speak, then they up prices for you. Usually is like a standard thing, and it happens to us always too. So sometimes you might be paying like 10 times more, unless you negotiate down or whatnot. But yeah, like when I travel, it's mostly more for experiences rather than stuff. I don't really buy stuff anymore just because I hate crap, but
it all
like
adds up and piles up, eh?
Totally, man. And like this is not my real background. If you see my real background, you'll be like, it's just a room full of garbage in my parents' house, right? Like, so like, yeah, I don't know, but do you think, Steve? Do you think once COVID is over, you and your partner, your spouse, or you and any future colleagues, or you by yourself, like you intend to travel? Are there places you want to go that are on the list, or tell us about your future travel intentions?
Yeah, so I have to say, not being able to travel because of the pandemic is one of the like, I don't know, just biggest
drawbacks.
downsides.
Yeah,
I love travel. So
totally.
my wife is from Germany and there's a lot of family over there. So pretty much, every year we get over to Germany and then we try to take a side trip to one or two countries depending on how much time we have. So like I've visited Dave before next door in the Netherlands, which is a good time.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah. And so I think in terms of like places to go once we can all travel again, like I want to do more of Italy for sure. I've been to northern Italy up in Tyrol in the mountains there, which is just amazing. But I really want to get to the southern part.
Nice.
And experience that. And aside from that, like I definitely want to get back to some of the more off the beaten path places too, because that's where like it's a really unique experience, like it's a real like eye opener. It's a real like wow, like look at this place I just went to. Like it's so unique. It's so different. Like what a great experience I got from going there.
Yeah,
I think that's like one of the best things with the work and business travel is that they take you to places you probably would never independently choose to go to, and it opens up your eyes. So I was kind of wondering, like, is there of those regions that you've traveled to, is there one that like really sparked your interest in going back to, like not necessarily the country, but like Central America, Africa, Asia, sort of thing?
Yeah, I think I really like to go back and explore more of Africa. Like I've only been to 2 of the countries there. There's just such a variety depending on like, Eastern Africa versus West, and same with Southern Africa versus, Northern Africa. There's such a variety there. I really would like to go back and explore more places there for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Africa is like it's like 50 plus countries or something like that in this continent. I remember one time back in the day, I was like, I wanted to do like a motorcycle trip through every African country when I was like super optimistic, and it didn't pan out. But I remember sitting there with a map and Googling the visas for each country, whether it was on arrival or pre. And like some of these countries, even with a Canadian passport, they wouldn't give you visas. Like you'd have to pre-apply and like really wait and explain. And it ended up costing like over like $1,500 worth of visas if you wanted to go to each country. So then I scrapped it. I was like, it's too much. But do you find that like your passport, like the visa process is pretty straightforward in most of the countries you go to? Have you ever had to wait for a visa, apply for one?
Oh yeah, Burkina Faso, I had to go to the embassy here in Ottawa. Thankfully, being in Ottawa, right, all the consulates and embassies are here. So, just take back then an Uber ride when that was still safe and easy to do. Just go to the embassy with all the paperwork and go in and wait and get the visa. So I, did that for Burkina Faso. The Pakistan High Commission here was great. They gave me a very nice tea service as I waited for just to be prepared. So that was great. And I think for Cote d'Ivoire, I applied online for that one. And then Honduras, we actually didn't need a visa to go to Honduras. Yeah, just show up and and with Canadian passport, you were good to go.
Yeah.
Did you try and get any of the local currency out beforehand? Is that possible?
Obviously, Dave, you can get Burkina Faso currency in Ottawa. I think it's pretty common, right?
I thought, because like when I was in London, I'm just saying this because I was in London when I traveled to Gabon, and I thought, oh, I'm in London, it's one of the big financial centers of the world. They'll have all the currencies.
Yeah.
And they're like, what are you talking about? We don't have this currency.
The Gabonian. What's the Gabon currency called?
It's a Central African franc. So they
the franc.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I would always travel like Central America, bring US dollars, West Africa, euros for sure. So I mean, when I was in Ouagadougou, I were at the hotel one day trying to exchange some euros into West African francs.
Yeah.
And the amount I wanted to transfer to exchange side, they were just like, no, that's too much. You have to go to a proper exchange. So I called up our local partner there. And he said to me, don't worry, we can do this, no problem. So I said, okay. So that night, we went for dinner and stuff, and we came back to the hotel. He's like, oh, I remember you want to go change some money. So he's like, come with me.
Yeah.
So we got in the car and we drove to the airport. I just assumed we were going to go into the airport and change money. But no, outside of the airport, there was a whole, mill of people out there.
And
we kind of pulled up next to them, and he knew one that had a really good rate. And so at one point it was like, okay, Steve, you can pull the money out now. So I pulled it out, gave it to him on the side of the street, and he counted it and gave me West African francs. The pitch dark on a weeknight in Ouagadougou. Yeah.
That's definitely on the list of things where I would not do independently.
Yes, exactly.
That's crazy. I remember I was in Indonesia, and inflation is so bad in Indonesia. I remember going to an ATM. I put my card in, my RBC card. It was like $100 or something Canadian, and it was pumping out millions of rupiah because of 100 Canadian dollars. It was 10 billion rupiah or whatever. And you're just walking around with a wad of cash and this and that. When I was younger, I used to collect all of them, but now I don't really do it. But it's fascinating, currencies and exchanges and how it works. And I think usually if you choose one of the big currencies, whether the pound, the euro, or the US dollar, you're pretty good anywhere in the world, right? They love foreign currencies because it's so good for them. But yeah, I've been in that situation where you try to convert a local currency in another country, and they're like, "What are you talking about? We don't have any of this."
What is this?
Yeah,
it's out of here.
You take Amex?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you, Steve. How do you find when you travel and stuff? Do you bring cash with you usually? Do you bring credit cards, debit cards? What's your financial setup when traveling overseas? Now that you have a little bit of experience with work and travel, what's your get up?
For sure. I still find that a Visa card is still accepted pretty much everywhere. It's actually kind of impressive, the number of places you can use a Visa card around the world. So for sure, having the credit card ready to go, but also having cash as the backup, because I've also been in situations where the Visa card worked at one point during the day, and then at another restaurant later in the day, declined. And then there's no rhyme or reason per se, because of course the next day it worked just fine. But you don't want to have to try to explain why you can't pay for a meal and maybe in a language you're not too familiar with.
It's very awkward.
Cash is king, as they say. It's good to have cash. Yeah.
So now that you're an experienced traveler to these places, have you changed how you pack for these types of trips? From your first trip to the latest one, was your suitcase getting smaller?
Yeah, for sure. I know I can get away with now, and just bare minimums is the way to go.
Totally.
Just do not overpack, pack less. Most hotels have a laundry service if need be. It's doable.
Yeah, I don't go quite to the level of my dad, who basically just brings a toothbrush. If that's, he's very much right that you can pretty much buy out whatever you need there and bring your passport and a means to pay for stuff, and you should be okay. But yeah, the other one I guess is a challenge is communications. If you want to stay in touch with your wife and friends and family back home, it can be eye-wateringly expensive if you decide to bring your phone with you and don't switch off roaming.
Even the the packages you can buy, at least in Canada here, they're still pretty expensive. I managed to get by like just on Wi-Fi, making calls with WhatsApp or Telegram or whatnot. That seems to be fine. But yeah, worst case, I think once I had to, buy some Skype credit to call a landline. But like, again, like I was able to use the Wi-Fi. So you make do. But of course, like if you have to flip on the phone for an emergency, you're going to do it and just eat the cost. It is what it is.
Well, one thing, Steve, I think also is echoing what you said. I think one thing that's really interesting to me is that now I think most of the world, wherever you go, is somewhat connected in some sense, right? Like I remember being in small villages in Thailand and they had the Wi-Fi symbol, right? You could still get a couple connections. So between like the Telegram and the Signal and the WhatsApp, if you have a little bit of a connection, you can make that message or that call just to let your loved ones know that I'm safe, I'm okay, and travel that way. But I remember when I was, I think 24, 25, I did backpacking through Southeast Asia for like 9 countries. And like,
Nice.
Honestly, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do it anymore now because I have a family and it's different. But I think traveling is probably one of the greatest things anybody can do, especially at a younger age, just to open your horizons. And when you're energetic and you're able to kind of slum it, you don't have high standards for things or whatnot. You can just like you guys did Europe and you were eating baguettes all day. I was just eating like, chocolate bars and this and that. And so like, I think it's one of the greatest things anyone can do, just traveling to see the world, and then you just can see how others live and how you can see kind of learn more about yourself and what your capacities are. But I don't know what you guys think about that, but that advice I give to everyone who's especially younger in their teenage years or whatnot. I say, if you have the time, just travel as much as you can, see the world.
Yeah, Tosh, I totally agree with that. It's, it really does broaden the mind. And for me personally, it makes me realize just how good we have it over here in Canada.
Yeah.
Like, you come home and like, the electricity is going to be on, the water is going to be drinkable. Like,
totally.
You go to the grocery store and you get 6 different kinds of barbecue sauce to choose from if you want.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
we have it so good here.
100%.
And traveling is a really good reminder of that.
Yeah. Dave, you've traveled a lot. I don't know what your thoughts are on this as well, but it's a good experience, and it really just makes you appreciate kind of your position for it. Not to say that people living in these places aren't having it good, maybe they're happy as well, but just that global perspective, I think, really gives your life, you can kind of gives it a little bit more meaning in terms of what to appreciate. Yeah. I was going to say, like, on the other hand of that, one thing that's really interesting is that I was living in Turkey last year, then I was in Malaysia for 3 years, then I was in Morocco, and I've lived in a couple of places around the world. But one thing that I get frustrated on is I bring a Western mentality to where I go. So like things are on time. I need things to get done, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know how you felt with your travels, but some places people are kind of on their own time and their own schedule and stuff like that. And so like sometimes it's really hard to adapt, but I guess you just have to go with the flow, which is sometimes difficult for us Westerners, I think, when we get things wanting things to get done. But things get done in other places in the world, but just at their own time, at their own speed.
That's it. And like the worst thing you can do is walk into some other place and just have the expectation that your standards will be the ones that are met. Like, I've been in situations where, our local partner said, we'll pick you up from the hotel at 7 for dinner.
Yeah.
And they didn't get there till 9.
Yeah.
Like, so you have a drink in the hotel bar and you just, you hang out. Like, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But you have to, of course, be respectful of that and just, be adaptable, be flexible, be able to pivot. And as you say, things do get done, just might not be at the same pace or whatever that we expect over here.
I
really noticed that with like infrastructure, because the traffic was so bad in some of the places I went to. So if someone wanted to do a business meeting with someone else, like you can only do like max 2 per day because
traffic.
Or if you have court in your office and people came to you, that's a different story. But like if you were someone who had to go around town, you can do max 2, because literally around Lagos, it takes almost an hour within certain small districts, 2 hours there and back, and that's your day gone. So it's just crazy how you have to kind of plan your days out in some of these mega cities. It's really overwhelming.
Dave, in Ottawa, with an hour, you could do a couple loops of Ottawa, right? You could go from like...
Well, Ottawa's a gigantic city, but geographically, like, it's absolutely huge. Sometimes I go and check out on Google Maps, and I'm like, what do they call it now? The Canadian Tire Center where the Senators play.
Yeah.
It's so far from
Yeah.
the city center. Like, it takes like, if there's no traffic, a half-hour drive from my parents' place, and then there's always traffic.
Yeah.
So within the same city, it's like a huge journey. And I remember like whenever we drive from like Ottawa to Montreal, you come back in Montreal into Ottawa,
Yeah.
you see the sign that says "Welcome to Ottawa."
Yeah.
You're still driving for like another half an hour before you see a house and some built-up areas, and you're like, "This is the capital city."
That's it. The area is quite large, but it's just so sparse. Yeah, and spread
Yeah,
out.
Canada could have like 6 billion people in it, and you'd never really
Well,
bump into each other.
one thing you said, Dave, earlier in our conversation is that like you could fit like 6 UKs into Ontario. I think like that too, because our landmass is so big geographically that some of these countries you go to are insanely small, and then you could have multiples of them. Like I always think Bangladesh, which is one of the most densely populated countries in the world, like 140 million people, is like 1/20th of the size of British Columbia or something like that. So like as a country,
Wow.
we are very underpopulated for our size, right? So like, I mean, Steve, going to Cote d'Ivoire or going to Burkina Faso or even Pakistan, like one Pakistan or one Karachi is pretty much almost half of an entire country, right? In terms of population, which is insane to think, like resources and geography and buildings and just the way things operate. And for us, we have like no, like there are times I walk out and there's like nobody around. So it's a strange thing to comprehend.
Yeah, and that's again why travel is so good, right? It really broadens your mind to think, hey, my reality at home is like not necessarily what's happening everywhere. It's good to have that perspective.
Yeah. So I think as we near, I got one question. I don't know if Dave's got one. My one is, what's your favorite place you've ever traveled to, whether for work or personal, in your entire life? Somewhere you'd go back or at least recommend to someone else?
Oh gosh, that's a really hard one. I don't know if I have one in particular. I've been fortunate to travel to a lot of different places. Dave and I actually have a mutual friend who lives in Seoul, South Korea.
Okay.
And I visited him, I guess about 10 years ago now. And I loved that trip. Seoul was just an amazing place.
Yeah.
Aside from that, Europe, I really enjoy traveling to Europe. I mentioned I went to northern Italy. Just the hiking in the mountains up there was so peaceful and remote. And we stayed at a monastery with our accommodations, which was really interesting too.
Wow.
So that was just a phenomenal, bit of solitude in the mountains, if you will. I really loved that. So I definitely love to go back there sometimes.
That's amazing. Dave, same question.
I guess
to you.
my last question is, what's your one tip or tips for travelers who may be about to go off to somewhere that they perceive as risky or that they're stressed out about going to? Have a local partner?
Yeah. So if you don't have a local partner, I guess try to make some local contacts. Like for example, off the top of my head, like if you're going to stay, at an Airbnb as opposed to a hotel, then maybe that host, has some suggestions or tips or connections to, maybe like a transportation company or an outings or sightseeing, if that's applicable company, that kind of thing. And, just be prepared. And I think to a certain extent, common sense will go a long way. So like, be prepared, bring what you need. But yeah, common sense is good. If you find the local partner that you trust, follow those instructions. But yeah, just try to enjoy, the experience for what it is. Yeah. Even if there might be a little bit of risk involved, it can be exciting. It can be thrilling if it's done the right way.
Absolutely. It's very good advice. I don't think I've met anyone who says they regretted traveling, right? So at least they did it, and then it was always an experience, whether good or bad. But that's great. Steve, thank you so much. That's awesome, your insights into it. I'm sure we'll have our listeners who are fascinated with it and asking many, many questions.
Yeah, well,
thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for both of you for inviting me on. I was glad to do this today. It was great.
Our pleasure, my friend. All right, man. Take care of yourself.
Thanks. You guys too. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.